Welcome along, Jim Reamer from Courtside, Indiana, and Kyler Staley from thehoosier.com. Guys, how's it going?
Oh, well.
Good. No complaints.
Plenty to talk about. Trayce Jackson-Davis returns. We'll get to that. Also this weekend, a heavy schedule on the AAU circuit. Is it returned? You had the Memorial Day Run and Slam. That's
next week.
Up. Yeah,
but we're not. Yeah, we're done till June till July.
That was a blank weekend last weekend, huh?
No, we played.
Which one was it?
It was a George Hill event that they host every year. It's a pretty good event. They didn't have the out-of-state teams they've normally had recently, but it was still a good event. Good local event, good way to end the spring.
And then Kyler, where were you?
I had the weekend off. I didn't have anything. Right. I didn't have anything I needed to do.
You're not allowed to have a weekend off, Kyler.
It was a blank. Well, it was a blank. That's what I thought. It was a blank weekend, as I call it.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot going on as far as IU targets concerned, and I've seen Xavier Booker and them play multiple times, so it was just a good weekend to just have off for as far as scouting Indiana targets and stuff.
We'll talk about the Memorial Day Run and Slam up in Fort Wayne that's coming up and the Nike EYBL event that's coming up in Louisville. But I guess we might as well stick with the news of the day. Trayce Jackson-Davis announced his return to Indiana on Friday, which not a huge surprise to me, but it was definitely a huge relief for Indiana fans because now they know that they're getting their All-American back. They know exactly what their roster is going to be. So they know what they have, and they can start the getting excited now of claiming ready for championships, which I don't think they're quite there yet, although they are very, very good personnel-wise. Still, my question is who's going to shoot the ball for this team. But first of all, what does it mean to get Trayce Jackson-Davis back for this team?
Well, that was I kind of threw a little wet blanket over it on one of the topics on the forum, which was, obviously having him is a lot better than not having him. There's no question about that. The question will be is how much better will they be? You alluded to it. How much better will they be than last year if the other areas of the game don't improve? So that's going to be, is it simply the shot making, or is it simply the offensive structure that allows those good shooters on paper to get the kind of shots that they can hit? That's the Miller Kopp thing. Miller Kopp is an outstanding shooter, but he didn't really get a lot of free looks during the year. Didn't get a lot of clean catches. Didn't come off screens a whole lot. Was obviously looked good in catch and shoot situations on kickouts, and he will benefit from Trayce Jackson-Davis returning. But somebody else is going to have to be. Other players are going to have to step up and provide the range and provide the spacing that will let Trayce and Race as well excel.
Kyler?
Yeah, totally agree what Jim just said there. Obviously, it's pretty big to have one of the best players in the nation come back, and then they'll build around him again. As far as sticking with the shooting topic and stuff, it's one of the guys that I'm kind of curious to see if he kind of does what he did towards the end of last year. That was Xavier Johnson. I thought he shot the ball pretty well towards the end of the season from the outside. So if that can continue and he can build off what he did last year, that would be great for Indiana's offense. And then Miller Kopp is another guy that's kind of been, public enemy number one with IU fans. So he's going to have a lot of pressure to kind of figure out his outside shooting as well. And, I could see him another year in Woodson's system. I could see him taking that next leap and being a lot better than he was last year.
So now even though that shouldn't be, the pressure starts to build because expectations will be there. And I don't know that they're fair because I see this as without knowing everything else that's going to be in the Big Ten. I'm expecting Michigan to be good because Hunter Dickinson is back. So that they're going to be strong and at the top. Purdue has a solid lineup, but they're losing a lot as well. Don't know what they're going to be. So I think Indiana is without question a top three team with looking ahead. The big question again is going to be shooting on how successful they can be But I want to look further than the Big Ten. Screw the Big Ten, because to me, the ultimate goal is what you do at the end of the year and not during the conference. Of course, you have to be successful during the Big Ten conference play without question. But it's after that. Can you acclimate to playing the type of basketball that everybody else is playing to beat those guys, to succeed in the NCAA tournament? And that's why this question of shooting to me is gigantic, because you can actually get away with it in the Big Ten. Purdue lives on having big guys. While they had Jaden Ivey last year, they haven't always been a great three-pointing team, but they've had teams that were very successful just because of having great post players. So is Indiana going to be good enough to compete with teams outside the Big Ten? The Arizonas, the Kansases, who are on the schedule.
Well, that'll be the thing too. And the Big Ten probably won't be as good as it was last year. So being in the top 3 or 4 of the Big Ten this year may not be the accomplishment that it would have been this past year. And that will impact something like seeding. And certainly if you're in the top 3 or 4 in the Big Ten, you're having a good year. It's a lot of this is degrees and increments. And, the Hood Schifino will be interesting to building on Kyler's point, because I would trust that Xavier Johnson could hit catch and shoot threes if he's clean. And now with Hood Schifino, if he is able to be a secondary playmaker, not that you would necessarily think that either one of them would be ideal as your best shooters on the floor, but if he could be a secondary playmaker, then he's also a guy who can contract the defense, force rotations, and lead to more open shots for Kopp, for who knows, if CJ Gunn can get on the floor. If he's going to be a presence, he certainly is going to be eventually be, if not immediately, the kind of shooter that Indiana would crave. And then there's, and I agree with Kyler that I think Xavier showed the ability last year when he was getting clean looks off catches, not necessarily off the dribble, but off catches, of being a guy who can hit that 3-point shot. And I'll dig up his stats after I get done with that point there. But Hood Schifino being an additional playmaker that Indiana hasn't had. I mean, look, Fennessy was always looking to pass first, which was great, but he wasn't a scoring threat, certainly not consistently. And Lander just never could get any traction. So Hood Schifino will be that additional playmaker on the floor that will help, break the defense down and create opportunities for others, and hopefully that frees up some extra looks on the perimeter.
Kyler.
Yeah. Again, having Jalen Hood Schifino as that secondary playmaker on the floor will be interesting to see. Jalen Hood Schifino has been doing that, his career at Monteverde Academy. He's been that playmaker. And I think, at first, the opposing defenses, as I should say, I think they will struggle to kind of figure out, Indiana's offense. It's very rare that you see 2 type of playmakers in the backcourt, like in Xavier Johnson and Jalen Hood. They're pretty similar in the way that they play, but at the same time, they both provide different areas of which they can, build on. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of lineup they go with to start off with. I don't know if Miller Kopp's going to start at that 3. I could see them having Tamar Bates at the 3, or having a 3-guard lineup along with Race and Trayce. Yeah. But to see how Indiana's offense goes, it's going to be very interesting, especially at the start of the season.
And Bates was a name that I'd forgot to mention as well. I would like to see his shot progress, and if Galloway can be a guy that you at least have to guard, then he can be. That could give him some additional room to create off the dribble, which for him is his bread. His ability to attack the basket is, I think, ultimately going to be his bread and butter. So,
how good of a 3-point shooting team does this team have to be with the personnel they have? That is actually a good question, because so much has been talked about with that, because they haven't been that good. But how good do they have to be? I don't think that they have to hit a ton. They just need to hit 3 or 4 a game, especially as long as you're not taking 25.
3 or 4 more a game, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, they shot 33% as a team last year. I mean, statistically, that's the same as 50% from the floor, right? But then let's check Big Ten numbers here real quick. Let's see what that ranked in Big Ten wise. Looking here on Sports Reference. Let's see. Indiana was 11th in the Big Ten in three-point shooting. They were 11th in the Big Ten in three-point shooting, and they were last in terms of volume. So not a good combination. That's actually a bad combination.
It is really bad. Because that shows that you're being selective and you're not being successful even at your selective shots.
Well, and selective may be the kind word. I just think the inability for them to get good looks is
that a result of the offense or the personnel?
It's offense, straight offense. But that's been my criticism that's been my one concern of the Woodson hire from the beginning, was that his acumen as an NBA coach was little quick hitters, little mini sets into isolation plays for Carmelo Anthony and Joe Johnson. I mean, he was so good at creating the isolation situations that it dawned Joe Johnson's nickname. He's ISO Joe. And he's ISO Joe for a reason, because he cut his teeth at the NBA playing for Woodson as an isolation player. Unfortunately, there's no perimeter scoring threat on this team, relatively speaking, not obviously to the level of Joe Johnson or Carmelo Anthony, but there's nobody on this team who plays that way. Not even at the college level. And CJ Gunn's maybe that kid at Lawrence North, but it remains to be seen what type of player he is, what type of player he will be in college. And I don't know that Tamar Bates is going to be anybody that would be an isolation player. I mean, and that's just the difference between having one or two go-to guys at the NBA level versus having a broader team concept when you don't have a tremendous perimeter threat. And there just was nothing in the offensive scheme to get Parker Stewart to come off screens, to get Miller Kopp to come off screens and hit those shots or to get those looks. Everything with them was incumbent upon jamming the ball inside the trace, which isn't a horrible idea, but at the same time, it became easier for teams to guard, and teams sometimes often felt in the Big Ten that they could let Trayce get his and still beat Indiana, because post-up basketball is becoming the second least efficient way to score in basketball these days, other than the 15 to 18 foot mid-range jump shot.
Kyler?
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking in my head as you were talking, Jim. I wonder if this next year you see them not feel as pressured to give it to Trayce all the time with the Malik Renews and stuff coming in and taking off the pressure from that. Is he going to be getting less touches? Does Woodson want to kind of run more of what he wants to run? There's just a lot of questions, going around with this whole lineup, how it's going to work. I do think you see a slightly different offense this year than you were, just going back to them not feeling as pressured to get Trayce all those touches and stuff. And I think you'll see a lot more open, a lot more spaced out offense than you did in the past. So, but yeah, just a lot of questions going in with this.
And some of these numbers. Sorry, Jim. I wanted to expand on the Kopp thing. Some of these numbers sometimes can be deceiving. For example, last year, Miller Kopp. Make sure I'm on the right one. Yep, Miller Kopp got 28 shots off screens last year. That's it, 28. Now, he did not shoot a very good percentage, but I don't think that's enough of a sample size to determine whether or not you're trying to get a kid coming off screens like that. I'd like to go back and dig up his Northwestern numbers, but I don't think I'm going to necessarily have the time in this space. But and whereas he shot 36% from three off of spot up, that's obviously his bread and butter, where he's going to be the best. But I also think that there's opportunities for him to come off threes, for him to get catches in transition where he does get a chance to get clean looks. And there just a lot of that stuff wasn't utilized at all. The transition stuff can be hit and miss, but the off-screen stuff just wasn't a part of their offense at all. And I think it should be, but then I'm a snob, I'm a snob for off-ball player movement. So not motion notwithstanding. So